not necessarily will they be in the right order. So question number 1, Bill 19, what rights to compensation do I have if the government freezes my land for electricity corridor under Bill 19? And I will turn that over to the government first.
So, actually, Bill 19 cannot be used for electricity solely. Bill 19 can only be used for a water storage project as an individual activity under Bill 19, or as a highway corridor. And then other pieces of transmission or pipelines, if they were compatible, could be utilized within that corridor. But Bill 19 does not speak to individual power lines or pipelines or any of that. Bill 19 is specifically for water projects or transportation corridors such as the Anthony Henday, the Stony Trail around Calgary, or Pine Coulee Dam down South, Old Man River Dam, those types of things would be where Bill 19 would be used. There is not a sterilization of anything forever, as has been stated. What it simply says is the first thing is, in Bill 19, you go out and consult with the municipality, get the names of all the landowners, and start the consultation process with the landowners. There's a 2-year time frame when the consultation starts that the government has to come to an agreement or buy the land if there is a willing seller. If there is not, and the government does not come to an agreement after all the consultation, the 2-year time frame, the project falls dead. You can't go forward with it. If it's moving along and you've got most of it, the Expropriation Act is still there. It is still utilized. But the fact is, you could sell your land and trigger that sale anytime in that 2 years, or you could agree to say, I'm already under agricultural zoning. I can farm this land. I can build a barn, or I can build whatever I do on my normal farming practices. You're not going to build a Walmart on there. You wouldn't, because the zoning isn't proper for it right now. All of those activities are acceptable. You could lease that land back until the project was built if you so wanted, or you could trigger that sale at any time and take it within that 2-year time frame and have the project go forward. Then you would take the payout whenever you decided to trigger that. So it does not sterilize any different than what your zoning you're already under. That zoning stays current.
Thank you. Keith?
Well, unfortunately, that's not what the law says. Section 2, sub 2 describes what a project area is, in other words, that for which your land can be frozen. It says, for the purpose of this act and regulations, a project is a public project if the project is a project related to the transportation of people or goods, which may include, as part of the project, a corridor of land for pipelines, pipes, and other conduits, poles, towers, wires, cables, conductors, and other devices, including ancillary structures, or B, a project related to conservation of water. So it is true that it does deal with water, but it is absolutely false to suggest to you that this legislation does not deal with power corridors, because it expressly does. What you need to understand about Bill 19 is that the sole purpose of Bill 19, whether it was intended or not, guys, it's about what the legal effect is. And this has been discussed at the Alberta Expropriation Conference. Guess where lawyers who practice expropriation law go in the fall? To the Expropriation Conference. And all of us agree this is a workaround to the Expropriation Act. Mr. Berger has made the mistake that others who aren't legally trained do. They look through the Act to find the first instance of the word they're looking for and think it applies. It makes reference to the Expropriation Act. It doesn't make the Expropriation Act apply. In fact, the way it's written, it clearly states that the Cabinet, and I believe this is in section 2 sub 1, it is, that there is no time limit. It says that this freeze can occur for a period of time. Once the order is filed by Cabinet, it is filed on your land title, it is served on the municipality, it's served on your bank, and you cannot do anything on your land without getting permission, any changes to your land without getting permission from the government. No compensation is payable. It is true they have to consult with you, but again, it's just like the other one. There's no criteria. They just have to come out and say, so what do you think about having your land frozen for a bunch of years? And you say, I don't like it. They say, well, that was a good consultation, and we're glad it came. I mean, there's no criteria. Section 6 and 7 don't work the way the government says it does. Those are the critical sections. The bottom line is, this legislation allows the government to freeze your land for prolonged periods of time without compensation, and if, when they finally decide to acquire your land 20 or 30 years later, all you get is market value, you're deprived of all the rights under the Expropriation Act. Thank you.
The next question. Why is the government holding the AUC hearings for the Heartland line, the West Alta Link line, and the ATCO line all at the same time? Does the government see the unfairness this creates for landowners?
I raised that point in a motion yesterday. This week's going by fast. Wednesday. It was yesterday, Wednesday? It was yesterday. It is bizarre to me that the line that is the subject of the spy scandal, the line that formed the basis of the government reforming and reinstitutionalizing and resetting the whole regulatory framework, would be forced by AltaLink to be holding its hearing at the same time that two of the other largest hearings in the history of this province are occurring. Speaker after speaker came forward yesterday and said to the Commission, we can't get a lawyer to represent us. We can't hire experts. They're all tied up in the Heartland hearing. A whole bunch of us who were at the hearing, the pre-hearing for the AltaLink West line, we call it WADL, West AltaLink line, in Red Deer, had to come down from the hearing that's going on right now in Edmonton. In fact, the chairman of the AUC had to adjourn the hearing in Edmonton so we could come down, and now ATCO's applied at the same time. It's creating an impossibility for landowners to hire experts and lawyers to represent them in these complex proceedings is a gross unfairness. And the government has the ability to set a process that's fair to landowners. The other thing that's happened is before they used to pick one route. Now they pick two routes for Edmonton, which cause one side to fight the other side. For Wattle, they've picked 5 routes. Drives up the costs, drives up the number of lawyers who have to be involved, divides communities, makes people fight neighbors, instead of looking at the true issue, which is Alberta's major industrial associations have reviewed the Bill 50 lines, concluded they're not needed, just as the Fraser Institute did and the Calgary School of Public Policy. It's a $16 billion boondoggle. It needs to stop. It's going to wreck our economy.
That do it? Yeah. Each of the different lines obviously is in a different area of the province. So the idea that there's conflict there, people affected are not involved in multiple ones at a time. The people who are adversely affected sounds to me like Keith and his lawyers. There's too much work for the lawyers to go around. That doesn't strike me as a national. That doesn't strike me as a provincial crisis. It doesn't strike me as a crisis. But I'd be happy to take that question back to caucus and discuss whether or not the timing is problematic. David Hancock, do you want to?
AUC decides when they hold their
The former Minister of Justice indicated that AUC decides when it holds its hearing. I'll make an inquiry when we get back.
Thank you. Why was Bill 24 pushed through so fast in December? And has the government any scientific proof for the storage of CO2s in our pore space? Will not the contaminants, will it not contaminate our aquifer?
The pore space we're talking about here is over a kilometer deep, 2 kilometers deep. The regulations will reflect that depth. We're not talking about just below the surface of the ground. Now the issue that has been brought forward in southern Saskatchewan, they have been utilizing, pushing carbon down and enhanced oil recovery. The province of Alberta, 70% of the conventional oil is still in the ground, even though many of those wells are not producing anymore. There is the opportunity to move